We tend to focus on influence that is loud and immediate, but the most durable legacies are often built in quiet, repeating moments of endurance that remain invisible to the public eye. Elizabeth Betty Vance grew up as a farm girl in the Arizona desert, eventually raising 10 children over the course of the 20th century. Her early life was defined by manual labor. She boiled wash water over open fires, and once physically defended her toddlers from a desert snake in her yard, using only a garden hoe. Maintaining a steady character is one thing when life follows a predictable path. It is another entirely when that life is hit by a series of extraordinary demands and personal tragedies. Betty's life is a study in what happens when an individual is asked to say yes to a difficult path, and stays on it when the circumstances become overwhelmingly hard. By 1945, Betty and her husband Marion had finally achieved financial stability on their farm. They were raising 3 young children and had a secure future ahead of them. Then a request arrived from their church: move to post-war Argentina to serve a mission. Their neighbors told them it was a mistake to leave their security behind, but they decided to go. Traveling across the Americas with 3 toddlers in 1945 was a massive undertaking. They boarded a propeller plane for a multi-day journey with overnight stops in Panama, Peru, and Chile. They arrived in a bustling metropolis. Betty spent her days navigating a foreign language and her nights caring for sick children, including making urgent hospital runs through crowded city streets at midnight. This period was marked by profound loss. Betty's unborn daughter was born dead during the mission, and shortly after returning home to Arizona, her 3-year-old son, Kenny, passed away from a brain hemorrhage. Her commitment survived the collapse of her family's safety. She chose to continue her service, showing that her earlier decisions were based on a foundational sense of duty rather than a hope for easy circumstances. Decades later, in 1978, Betty had raised her remaining children and reached a stage of life where she could finally expect some rest. That was interrupted by a breast cancer diagnosis. She underwent an immediate mastectomy to stop the spread of the disease. Only weeks after her surgery, while her body was still healing, another request came. She was asked to move to Sao Paulo, Brazil, a massive city of millions. She didn't use her illness as a reason to decline. She packed her bags, began learning Portuguese, and prepared for a new round of work. While recovering from a major operation, Betty spent her days in intensive language training, preparing to spend 18 months laboring in a new country. In 1982, another assignment sent Betty and Marion into the Andes Mountains of Ecuador. She spent her time among the Otavalo people, teaching in the high-altitude villages and learning to communicate across a significant cultural and linguistic divide. This distance came with an emotional cost. She had to leave her elderly parents behind, knowing she was unlikely to see them many more times. In 1988, another tragedy struck. Her daughter Susan was killed instantly by a lightning strike while jogging. Betty wrote in her journals that everyone eventually faces these moments. Her response to the sudden loss was to continue her work, choosing to lean into her faith rather than withdrawing from it. When Betty passed away in 1993, she left behind a family that had grown exponentially. One life branched into 10 children and 55 grandchildren. Her influence was visible on a map of the Western Hemisphere, stretching from Arizona down through Argentina, Brazil, and Ecuador. This scale of impact was the result of 70 years of specific, selfless decisions made when it would have been easier to choose comfort. Eventually, we all face a moment of unexpected tragedy or difficult opportunity. The question is whether we will have the courage to step forward.